Hey, welcome to another podcast of Law Enforcement Unconventional with your host, Robert Scally, and our real-life shield maiden,
Wendy Schallmere, coming to you from the top of Bunker Hill.
Our show is dedicated towards assisting law enforcement in special operations to include military, rescue, first responders, and to all others who are trying to help protect our brave men and women in blue. Each week, we're going to bring you an unconventional tip, tool, tactic, or training from around the country. Please sit back, listen to our show, and enjoy yourself. Thank you. Hey, welcome back to the show.
This is Bobby and Wendy from the top of Bunker Hill, bringing you Law Enforcement Unconventional.
And we are glad to be here. We have a pretty good show today, don't we?
Yes, we do, as always.
Our show today is in response to Facebook.
Yes, it is.
And the response is based on a design that Wendy did that goes on the Vector shields. We're not just going to be talking about the Vector shield today. We're going to be talking about why and how this design came up, how it's protecting officers, where it came from, the history of the design. It's not just what you think it is it, Wendy?
Absolutely not.
What is it based off?
It's based on theories and technology that has worked through the years, through thousands of years, that Bobby has put together to comprise an entire curriculum that is protecting law enforcement today. We reach back to thousands of years with the Romans. We reach back to the early 1900s with some people that Bobby's going to explain to you.
The Spartans, I talk about them a lot.
It's a very eclectic training program that is based on things that have worked through the centuries.
Let's talk about that design that you designed. Go ahead, Wendy. Tell us a little bit about that design.
That design that I designed actually came from an idea that you had several years ago when you were doing your research. And it is a pattern that you will now see when you're out and about. You'll probably recognize it now. The pattern on the back of an ambulance is similar to what we do. And there's different physiological reasons and responses that are built into what happens when a person sees those things.
Even a chevron, right? The sergeant's stripes, every police officer sees that every day, right? They see sergeant's stripes. It's based on that.
It is very similar to the chevron.
And, you know, the history of the chevron, where does it come from? Does anybody know?
I would say the military or the Spartans.
Yeah, it's actually from the Spartans, and it's called lambda. And lambda, that upside down V, which we call sergeant stripes, when I was a sergeant, the old days. And that design was for a reason. And let me tell you a little bit about where it came from. It's called lambda. That upside down V is called lambda. It's the Greek letter lambda. And what that used to denote was the Spartans came from a part of Greece called Laconia. Now, they would face their enemies in battle, and you would see their shields brightly painted red with a bright yellow lambda sign.
If you saw that and you were opposing force, you knew it was going to be a bad day.
It'd be a bad day when you're facing Spartans. The Spartans were just an incredible fighting force, right?
Yep.
Here's a trivia question. How tall was the Spartan?
They were pretty tall.
Very tall. You know why they were tall?
Because of breeding.
Yes, they were actually picked and selected from birth to be larger, beefier, stronger than anyone else. And they were trained from 8 years old when they went to the Agoge to they were 19 years old and they were picked for the military. Here's a fact that people, when did you stop military service to Sparta? Do you know what age it was?
I don't think they ever stopped. I don't know.
60.
60. On that note, I saw a gentleman yesterday on social media. He is 91 years old, and he's a law enforcement officer, and he doesn't plan to retire.
That's incredible.
It was amazing. You can see that on our Facebook page. Go to Vector Shields, Vector Police Shields and Training, and go see that. That gentleman's 91 years old and never plans on retiring. I thought that was amazing.
That's incredible. And talking about the history of shields, and I always throw the history trivia in there, plays a lot to do with what we're going to talk today about camouflage and cover and concealment and all that stuff. And it always, people ask me the questions, well, how could you be camouflaged if you were standing in a bright red cape holding a red shield on a battlefield in Greece? Didn't you know you were facing a Spartan? And again, that wasn't to really camouflage them per se. What that was intended to do was cause predatorial confusion. Disorient, because again, your heart rate would go up knowing that, hey, we're facing a Spartan army that is not going to retreat. So like you said, it's going to be a bad day for everybody. So the history has a lot to play with it. And you know what's interesting too? You always hear me say this, where the eye goes,
so does the round.
Right, so does the round, the tip of the weapon, the aim, everything goes, right, where the eye goes. It's trajectory, right? We calculate trajectory in our frontal lobe. And if you've ever been to one of our training classes, you're going to find out that we use a lot of science in the stuff that we train.
There's tons of science, physiology, human reaction. There's like 5 or 6 different principles that are combined to go into what we do.
Yeah, so we're not just talking tactics, because tactics, we always answer the reason why. So we're going to answer some of the reasons why we put together this Dazzle pattern. And I wish we invented it, but we didn't.
No, we did not. That came from prior technology.
For thousands of years. And it's actually the last time it was used. Well, let's talk a little bit about the color red, right? How do you use red in camouflage? You don't.
You don't. It's not meant to camouflage. It's meant to disorient and confuse.
So one thing that they did use camouflage, the Spartans used a red cape. You know how they used it as camouflage?
How they used it as camouflage. It's more to disorient, but
it would camouflage blood.
Oh.
So if a Spartan was bleeding or wounded in battle, they could bleed into their red cape and the enemy would not see them bleeding. It's interesting, isn't it?
Very.
So they used the red to camouflage blood. You know who else used red uniforms? The Romans. And this is interesting. Up until about 17, 18, you had the British redcoats were all using that in open conflict for the same apparent reason. If they were shot during battle, the enemy wouldn't see their blood leaking into their uniform. Isn't that an incredible thing? So they were using, now think about the concept of camouflage. How do we use camouflage, the bright color red, to camouflage? So we're not camouflaging against the enemy, we're camouflaging our own movements or what would be seen as our own
a weakness.
Weakness,
yeah,
correct.
If you're bleeding, you're weak.
Yeah, exactly. So, and also another interesting thing about the Spartans, they would show up and they would have a red feather plume on top of their helmet. Now, between the height of 5'7", 5'8" to 6'1", when you're wearing something that size, on the battlefield, you appear to be almost 7 feet tall.
That would be very disconcerting.
Think about that. You're facing a soldier that's been bred his entire life to fight and die for Sparta, who's 7 feet tall. And they would display their shields and let you know that you were facing a Spartan. I just think that's an incredible thing. So again, where the eye goes, so doesn't the barrel of the weapon, right? Where that happens. So that really plays into a factor with law enforcement today that the same principles apply to what we do at Vector. We want them looking at the shield, correct?
100%. And
Why?
It's proven in documented police reports when these Dazzle patterns are displayed to someone who's trying to attack an officer, it causes a delay in the OODA loop, which we'll get into later. But because of that delay, it offers an officer a window of time where they can react.
A second or two, right?
A second or two, just a second. That's
Right.
all an officer needs. And in that second or two, an officer can protect him or herself and potentially de-escalate a situation, which has proven to work in documented police reports over the past 5 or 6 years. It works.
And that's interesting because a lot of times other officers will see our shields and they'll say to other departments that are actually holding them or doing a vehicle takedown, hey, what is that? And that is exactly why we build what we build.
Yeah, and on that note, we had a federal agent who was doing a takedown with the Dazzle pattern. And when they did a vehicle takedown, when they put the shield up to the window, it totally shocked the guy, and they were able to do whatever they needed without any incident. There were no shots fired, and the gentleman was arrested. Like,
what it is
safe.
Exactly. And what we're trying to do is we're there to protect the center line, right? Our shields are designed to protect the center line of the body. So if I can keep someone's eye addressed on firing onto a shield, then we've done our job. Right?
Correct.
If they're going to shoot, please shoot the shield.
Or stab.
Or stab.
Or throw a bottle.
Or throw, or attack. It becomes an eye-catching magnet, even for someone throwing a rock, right? Because it's like throwing at a pitcher's glove. They're going to see it, and they don't even know that their mind is following this pattern of, again, addressing, because the trajectory in the frontal lobe, they don't even realize that they're throwing at the object or the shield. And that's why we build what we did. So Wendy built this shield cover that was used in day and nighttime operations, correct?
Correct. It's got yellow for daytime, and it's got 3M reflective for night.
And it's a this may sound funny, but it's a happier shield.
It is a much more happier, friendlier shield.
Yeah, and again, we could put a big smiley face on it, and people say, wow, look at that, it's so friendly. Or you can make it to look ominous by doing shield cover. But our covers are designed, and we use 3M reflective. You can see us from a mile away when a light hits our shield.
And that has also worked in an exercise. There was some officers that could not be seen, but because our shield had police on it and the 3M reflective, they saw that those were officers, in fact, and it avoids blue on blue.
Right, and that's a thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
we had a department actually reach out and tell us that when they're in doing a building search at nighttime, the flashlight caught the reflection of a shield, so we had no blue on blue incidents, and that happens. I mean, unfortunately, those accidents do happen. But if we know that we're going to put a light on and we're going to see a reflective shield, I would rather have that happen, see the shield, than not see the shield and hope not shoot an officer. You understand? So that's really important to us. So we take great pride in building equipment that works, but everything we build has a reason why we do it. Even on our Dazzle pattern shield covers, we have quick release straps. We have, right, where the straps are reversed, so you have to put your hand inside in order to open them. We do a lot of things that go into this that we don't really tell the general public.
Correct. As far as the thread, it's a nylon thread. It lasts forever. The thread probably will outlast whatever other your equipment. It will outlast your shield or whatever else you've got there. Not our shield, but you'll have these covers around for a very long time.
Yeah, and the thread. I mean, how many people go into this using a high density nylon thread to make sure it's not going to rip? We're not going to have those problems. We're using the best reflecting 3M equipment, stuff that we have available at technology. And this, again, you see this in some police cars now where they have the black reflectiveness, right? Mm-hmm. They also have, we can also put, right, glint tape on it.
Correct.
If you have IR,
if you got an eye in the sky, you can look down and see friend or foe on the shield.
Yeah, so if you have eyes up there and you want to look down, you can see the glint tape is going to loud and clear. Hey, I know where the good guys are out on the field. So we do that for a reason. But today we're going to talk a little bit about what we call the Dazzle pattern, right? Razzle Dazzle. That's actually, if you look it up in the history books, it's either known as Razzle Dazzle or
Dazzle Camouflage.
Dazzle Camouflage. And it's a really interesting thing because it took place around World War I in response to U-boats. Now, I was doing a lot of reading on U-boats last night. Interesting. It's called undersea boot. On U-boats, undersea boats. They were 200 feet long. They ran on diesel fuel. And they would prowl the English channels and all the waterways. And they were sinking basically 8 ships a day. That's incredible.
Wow.
And then came along the Lord of the Sea.
That's an amazing title.
I want that title. That's the title I want. What do you want to be in life? I want to be Lord of the Sea. And guess who the Lord of the Sea was?
I don't know, but you're going to tell us.
Yes, you
do. Winston Churchill.
Yes, it was. And she knows that because on my notes, I'm pointing to it and I'm making it funny, but it was Winston Churchill. And that was pretty interesting because he was a pretty advanced thinker, right? He thought outside the box, right?
Very forward thinking.
Very forward thinking. And he saw that, hey, these boats are going across the English Channel. They're these merchant marine ships, and they're being sunk. So how do we stop that? Now, you can't hide a big ship.
Not very easily.
At all, right? Right? You can't, unless it's a Philadelphia project, and that's another whole other
That's
show.
a whole other episode.
So, no, but you can't hide it. So you have to kind of hide in plain sight. Kind of like, hey, you're facing a Spartan. It's a red cape. And what they come up with, some really genius stuff. They used nature. They used artists from the Royal Academy to help with this. They used a lot of great stuff. And I want to tell you a little bit about the history of how all that happened, because it was really interesting things and how that plays into law enforcement, right? How does predatorial confusion, how does a pattern play into law enforcement? How does reflective tape, how does even the sides of a patrol car, right? Where you see patrol cars now that have the black lettering on it, but it's reflective only when light hits it. Interesting stuff, right?
Daytime versus nighttime operations.
Correct. Yeah. So how does that all play into predatorial confusion or announcing who we are, what we're doing here? It plays so much into this. But so in the first part of the 19th century, well, 1900s, what happened was so many boats were being sunk, and the Lord of the Sea had this idea, so he kind of put it out there to people and said, hey, we need some ideas on how to stop this. And the interesting thing, there was a British zoologist named John Kerr. Now, no military background, just a zoologist. He studied nature, and what he did was he come up with this thing called party coloring, P-A-R-T-I, party coloring. And what he did was he kind of looked at, now what do you think he looked at?
Party coloring.
Yeah, but aside from that, what do you think it was?
Animals?
Yes, he looked at animals, and he looked at, because he was a zoologist,
And probably insects too.
Right, and here's another question. How does a zebra survive on the plains of Africa, bright white and black stripes?
The flicker effect.
Correct, the flicker effect, because we know this, because we study this. Because lions are colorblind. They only see in black and white because they're predators. They hunt at nighttime.
And when they're seeing a herd of zebras go across the desert, they just see a bunch of flickers.
Yeah, it looks like a TV screen to them. So they really can't pick out one zebra. So the strength is in the herd and the coloring of the black and white stripes. Now that's interesting because what we just said plays into effect in what we're going to talk about.
And that is actually the true meaning of predator confusion. Strength in numbers with the flicker effect, and so they can't single out just one, and
Right.
it leads to a lesser kill ratio.
Right, and a higher survivability for the opposing herd, which doesn't have big fangs and teeth, and they can really protect themselves by staying together, right?
Yeah.
So take this whole mindset and apply it to merchant marine ships. Interesting, isn't it? So they come up with this. So this guy, John Kerr, writes this letter to the Lord of the Sea, Winston Churchill. Well, Churchill kind of buys into it for a minute. And what he says was, okay, we'll try it out. So they try it out. They do a couple of these patterns. And it wasn't really what the Dazzle pattern was. It was the beginning phase of it, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, okay, camouflage. People ask me, hey, what's your favorite camouflage, like on uniform colors? Well, I liked OG 107s because I wore those in Central America. And what that was it was kind of an olive drab uniform. It was ripstop. And I liked it because when you're in the shadows, right, not out in the open, but you're in the shadows, it would take the leaves, the reflective light of the leaves, and it would transfer it onto your uniform. So when the sun was coming through, you would actually get the leaf pattern all over your OG 107s. And it was just an awesome uniform. And that just was my favorite, how camouflage played into an effect, right? You're looking, because when you're out there, you're looking for irregularities in nature or irregularities in what you're looking, and that's how you spot targets. So the U-boats commanders were doing the same thing. Now the U-boats were interesting, and I'm going to tell you some little facts about it. You know how long it was? How long a U-boat was?
I don't know that.
200 feet. You know,
wow.
200 feet. And it was really cramped living quarters. And there were 35 people on the U-boat. And they had, I think it was 31 enlisted and 4 officers. And they didn't have that many beds, so that's where the word hot cotting. They would jump once one team slept, and once they get up, the next team, they would rotate. Some would go use their same bed, go to sleep, and they would do this. And it's a really interesting fact, but they had on board of a U-boat 12 torpedoes. 12. And as the war went on, they went from 12 to 20, but normally 12. Now think about this. Also, what the German officers had a kill ratio. So if they fired a torpedo, they wanted to make sure that torpedo sunk that boat. That's how they had to write in their mission reports. They couldn't not hit a boat. They would use calculation, trajectory, all of this stuff.
Didn't you say that they were actually executed if they didn't make their kill ratio?
I mean, that was something that people talked about, like it didn't go too well for some of them. Some of the German U-boat commanders, if they didn't hit their targets. I mean, I don't know how true that was, but there was some accounts that would say in that some careers were ended in a not so good way.
I would say that's a not so good way.
So again, they had to make, because again, at the beginning of the war, they had about 38 U-boats. So now here's Churchill faced with this idea that now we have to build something that's going to contend against these undersea predators, right? Because again, we're going back to nature, a predator versus prey. So now we have a merchant marine ship that's taking food and and things transporting it across and commerce, and now it's being sunk. We have to do something. So John Kerr comes up with this idea of party coloring. And what he did was he said, let's take nature, right? And we'll paint the ship so at certain lights and certain visibilities, it will kind of blend in with the sky, blend in with the sea, right? We're not talking about geometric patterns. We're talking about coloring. So he looked at nature and he said, hey, let's look at what nature's doing and how it camouflages into the environment. Really interesting, right? Interesting thing. Now, we got to know the history of what we're talking about because Vector, we study this stuff. We'll talk about it, we'll study it, and you're kind of getting a brief insight into our mindset, the stuff that we read about and the stuff that we talk about, because we want to take protection, right, Wendy, to a whole new level.
Yes.
And that's what we work on all the time, right? How do we make this better? How do we make that better? I mean, when our shield will never be better. I mean, it's the best we can possibly humanly make it. But how can we make other add-ons that will add on and protect the officers in these dangerous environments?
That incorporate these ideologies.
Exactly, because if we study history, the answers are there.
They're 100% there, and we've gotten away from that, and that's what the problem is.
You know, and how equipment affects the outcome of a mission, right? I was reading the other night in the book, What If? You got to read that book, great book. And it was talking about Alexander the Great. Now, what does Alexander the Great have to do with Dazzle pattern? Really interesting. He had a horse, and he would be, and back in those days, he led into battle in the front. Interesting thing. He was actually attacked, cut off from his troops in his first battle, hit in the head with an axe. You know what saved his life? His
helmet.
The helmet, exactly. And the helmet saved his life. And then Cletus, who was his bodyguard, really tough bodyguard, he saved his life. He threw a spear and he killed the person that hit him, Spiticus, I think it was his name, Spiticus, or that he was trying to hit Alexander the second time to finish off because he hit him the first time and disorientated. But the reason I'm telling you this is because equipment saved his life. And then the bodyguard came and saved Alexander's life. I mean, it didn't go too well. 7 years later, he had him executed. But initially...
For a minute.
Saved it for a minute, right? But that's why we're talking about how equipment really saves the day. Good equipment can save your life. And if you're not building or buying or investing in yourself with the best equipment, then you're doing yourself a total disservice.
And it also changes lives for generations to follow.
Generations. You know, when I hear people say, I'm not a shield guy, everybody's a shield person. If I said that back in ancient Greece or the Romans... You would
have probably been decapitated.
You would have been killed because a shield was actually more valuable than a sword. Because the sword was meant to kill. What was a shield used for?
To protect.
Protect everybody.
Yeah. Not just yourself, but your brother.
But everybody else. Oh, I'm sorry. We had a malfunction on one of the chairs. But we're unedited, so we're going to keep that going.
Maybe I need to go on a diet.
Wasn't my chair. It was Wendy's chair.
Oops.
Okay, in 1914, we have John Kerr doing his thing, right? So what happens is Churchill buys into it. But then around the end of 1914, almost 1915, Churchill leaves, right? And they go right back to painting their ships gray again, suffering the same damage. It's happening all over again. Now comes in a guy, an American named Abbott Thayer. Interesting character. Now, this guy wrote a book called Coloring, or let me think of the name. It's Coloring and Coloration in Animals, but I'll post it. It's one of those names, one of those 1909 coloring or something. But anyways, the book was based on color shading and disruptive patterns, right? Now this guy Thayer he didn't invent it, but he was actually given, he didn't invent the Dazzle pattern, but he was given as one of the fathers of camouflage, of modern camouflage, because again, using disruptive patterns and coloration and shading, right? Because that's exactly what camouflage is based on. Well, that had to come into play. So in 1909, he writes a book, and then, believe it or not, the British didn't go for it. So again, they're just like rejecting. So they reject Kerr, now they reject Thayer. Now, Thayer was actually a pretty interesting character. His name was Abbott Thayer, Thayer.
You're not going to believe this, but that is my mother's maiden name.
Really?
She's a Thayer.
Wow! And he was born in Boston, and he was a very learned man. Studied nature. One of these really smart guys.
Didn't you also say that Picasso tried to take credit for it?
Yeah, during that time around the early part of the 1900s, Picasso actually tried to take credit for the Dazzle pattern because a Cubist the Cubist design. So, I mean, think about that. Come on, you're going to take credit for that? It's like, hey, I did this. This is my idea. I mean, I wish I could say that. Like, I don't even say that. People are like, oh, wow, dude, I love your shield. And I'm like, you know what? I wish I would have invented it. But it was the R-Give handle. This handle on our shield was designed by the Spartans, a 3-point retention system. They were brilliant. So, I mean, I study history.
They were amazing tacticians.
Amazing.
With the rudimentary tools that they had.
Amazing people. And so Abbott there, so he's studying nature, right? He's studying how animals blend in nature and how all that works. But he's a really interesting character. Look him up on Google him, and you learn a lot about what he did with, but you know what the truth is? The British didn't go for it. So they went back to...
and we get pressed back on that too. If someone's pushing back because they don't understand something and it could actually save your life.
They don't know what they don't know.
We just ask for people to go into this with an open mind. This is technology that does work. It's been proven to work.
It's it's beyond tactical. Like they talk about shooting. And shooting is only the last result of the mission. It's actually you have to get there before undetected or not detected at all, because shooting could be the result of it's a failed mission. Mm-hmm. If you're going to start shooting, it's a failed mission. If I have to make an officer get from point A to point Z, I have to give them, and they're on the open, we have to give them what? We have to cause predatorial confusion in the mind of the shooter. And that's what we do. So when I say you don't know what you don't know, study history. Read what these people were doing, because the secrets are in our history books, right? And I'd like to send it out to Sister Claire. Thank you for... beating that history stuff into me in high school. No, not true.
You probably deserved it.
I didn't.
I would have been beating you guys too.
Last in my class. So the one thing about Abbott, he was kind of like, this is a really funny thing. When he went to the British and he told them about this, he had an idea. Now listen to this. He wanted to paint submarines, like the British submarines and everything, like a mackerel.
I was just going to say yellow.
What
is mackerel?
A mackerel
like
fish.
Shiny, silver?
Like a mackerel fish, white like a mackerel fish. And you know what happened? They called this, look it up.
It's like a fishing lure. Why wouldn't you though?
Yeah, but he said, well, he wanted to paint submarines. He said, paint them mackerel. Uh-huh. So his idea was paint them to look like schools of fish underwater.
Yeah.
Interesting concept, right? But apparently they called it a freak method. And here's this guy Abbott there, trying to give all these really good ideas. And who even jumped on the boat against him? No, he's actually known as kind of like the father of American camouflage. But the British are like saying this guy's a freak. And actually, Teddy Roosevelt, right, the Rough Rider.
Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt would laugh at him, basically saying that this is crazy. Because he was Because again, the Rough Riders didn't use camouflage, right? They used weapons. Dude, I'm going to use a weapon. We're gonna go up San Juan Hill, and they didn't use horses, and that's a whole nother story. But you know what happened? They didn't understand the American Indians, the native people. They were using camouflage from the elements. We'll talk about that in later stuff, like early evening nautical time, the shades of gray. Predatorial confusion. They were using camouflages to get up on buffalo. They were using that. And that's why they were so effective in their fighting methods.
And it worked.
And it worked.
The arrogance of those that didn't know or didn't understand.
Yeah, it's always the arrogance.
It's common sense.
But this guy Thayer he had some really great ideas, but you know what? British didn't go for it. Nope, we're not using it. So now we have Kerr and there. Nope, British aren't going for it. Then comes in this guy named Norman Wilkinson. Interesting guy. He was like a Naval Reserve lieutenant commander or something, and he was a volunteer for the British Navy. And he wanted to create a pattern. Now listen to this. This is pretty interesting. He said, listen, we see boats, right? We see them. Can we make them disappear? No. Can't do that. There's nothing we can do. But what he did was he wanted to develop a pattern that was going to cause confusion in whoever was looking at it. Now think about that. You look at a big boat. How do you cause confusion? What he did was he wanted to paint these geometrical designs on this. And what would happen would be when you looked at it, you didn't know where the front of the boat was, the back of the boat. You didn't know. And he painted them all different with these abstract straight designs, black and white. That's where we get the Dazzle from, black and white lines. So you think about that. So what he did was he painted them. So he had all these different ships and different classes.
With different geometric patterns.
With different geometric patterns. So you couldn't tell which class ship that was involved in, because up through a periscope looking at a U-boat, you didn't know where the front of the boat or the back of the boat was. Now, what he wanted to do was cause confusion in the ship's size, the speed, the direction. And what he wanted to do was force the enemy at that point, because they were kind of confused underwater what they were looking at, to take a bad firing position. Isn't that interesting? So he was forcing them to take a bad firing position. So how does that come into what we do here at Vector, right? Because if all of a sudden you're faced with a shield and you have to, and the shooter has to readjust fire in order to strike the officer, that delay in reaction saves the officer's life or allows them to transition to one of their tools. That's exactly what we do.
And it's worked several times.
And it works. It's working for us. It works all the time. It's worked through history. It's worked in the English channels, right? These geometric patterns cause these predatorial confusions. So what he did was he built this stuff, and they looked at it. Now here you got, he's not a scientist, by the way. He's just, you know what he does for work?
I wouldn't guess.
He's when I say Marine, I don't mean Marine as in the military. He is a Marine.
Biologist.
Nope. Painter.
A marine painter.
He paints pictures.
He
Paints pictures of boats.
Okay.
Now, that's kind of crazy. Now you've got Kerr, zoologist. Yet there, same type of background, right? Then you have Wilkinson, who's just a painter. But you know what? It was a common sense approach. So the way he explained it to everybody, and he had no scientific data to back him up. It wasn't like he was saying, hey, the animals are using this. He had absolutely zero scientific data. But you know what?
It's like you can be book smart or street smart. He was a street smart.
He was street smart.
Yeah.
And you know what? He actually, the British said, let's do it. Because they believed in what he was saying. It was a common sense approach, right?
Common sense approach. And we've actually had that. We've had officers who actually use the shield with the Dazzle, and then after the incident that happened, they would come back to us and you're like, you know what? This works.
Right. Yeah. Hey, by the way.
Happened every time. When we stopped, our shield stopped a handgun on Fort Bliss, and the officer that did that, when he reached out to me immediately and he goes, Wendy, your shield worked perfectly. And I want to tell you that flinch response and the Dazzle worked. It disoriented the driver long enough to where it scared him and he was shocked and didn't know what it was. And then the officer was able to stop the gentleman with no shots fired.
And that's what we did our job.
It was a good ending.
You know what the thing is? How do we quantify our successes? We can't. And I'm going to get to that, because you couldn't quantify the Dazzle pattern success during World War I. They couldn't tell how effective it was.
It's untold tragedies, really.
But I'll get to that. But so in 1916, they inaugurate the Camouflage. These were people that were going to paint the boats, and they had, I think, on the Merchant Marine side, they had probably 4,000 boats that they painted.
Holy mackerel! Yeah, talk about mackerel.
With this pattern design. So they painted these geometric patterns. And please, I want you to go on the history books and check it out. Dazzle pattern. You can see what exactly we're talking about. But they paint this Dazzle pattern. And they took about 400 naval ships, did the same thing, right? They painted this on there. So that was around 1917. Now, this is interesting. They were wondering about what kind of designs to put on it. You know who they contacted? Not scientists. Like you would think it was like, oh, I'm going to go get the scientists to give me some facts. They actually approached the Royal Academy of Arts. I was
just going to say designers of some sort.
Yeah, painters and designers. And they actually, listen to this, they set up a periscope inside of a room. And they would look through a periscope, and they would make little miniature models with these geometric patterns with different light times to see how it blended in against the background.
Smart,
right?
Yeah.
At different lights, because when the horizon goes off, you're going to blend in with the cloud covering. You're going to blend in, and this is interesting too, because if the Germans were facing the land, they were on the outside, and the boat was more near the land. Sometimes it was reported that the German U-boat commanders couldn't tell if it was a ship or the tops of buildings.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Very.
So I find that really super interesting that they would do this. So you get 16, 17, and they're building all of this stuff. And, they were pretty impressed because it was starting to work, right? Now,
Well, that's what we found.
Yeah.
People didn't understand it and they were hesitant. But now that we've got documented saves in the field,
yeah, and
the technology does work.
Again, police are the most non-skeptical people.
Pete Nyman.
Yeah. Well, it's like I don't believe that. It's like,
I
okay.
call BS.
Yeah, I call it. Oh, right. It's hilarious, but we deal with it all the time. But they couldn't quantify how successful this whole thing was with the Dazzle pattern, because then they got reports, and you can look at these, you can read them. I'm not going to read them to you online. I'm just going to give you a synopsis. But what it basically said was some of the U-boats commanders said this was the best camouflage they have ever seen on a boat. Now you think about that. Because remember, they're looking through a periscope on something off in the distance. Now, this is where the number 12 is going to come back into play. They had 12 torpedoes on board. If they didn't have a good shoot-to-kill ratio, well, they would lose command of their vessel or whatever else.
I think I'd keep going and just not come back to home base.
But you have 12 shots.
Yeah.
So let's say you shoot one, and you're shooting at the front, and you think you're shooting at the engines, and it's not hitting the engines, and you're like, okay, they can shut off all the compartments and stay afloat. Then they fire again, not knowing what part of the boat they're firing at. This is where the predatorial confusion came in, and that's really interesting, isn't it? So again, they would have to sit and calculate and say, what is it? How far is it? What's the distance? And then, isn't that interesting? So all during World War I, this whole pattern was very successful.
A lot of strategy.
A lot of strategy. You know why? Human calculations, right? They had to take in human calculations. So they would actually do something, which is also interesting, is that on some of these boats, they would put a false bow wave, B-O-W, bow wave. And that, you know what that was for? When the periscopes went up and they saw a bow wave.
I think it was the front of the boat.
They would think it was the front of the boat, but what it was calculating is the higher the wave was on the boat, the faster the boat was cutting through the water. So they would calculate their trajectory based on that.
That's interesting. In boats, sometimes they will falsify the line on the boat. They do that. And from where I'm from, some of the guys, because your boat's not supposed to sit so low, they would put a false line.
See?
And it would make the boat appear to be higher than it was.
Yeah, so again, they're using the same thing. They're using this type of dazzle pattern camouflage on currently today. So to do this, but I found that really interesting that they would use that. So they would put this false bow wave on there. So when they were calculating trajectory or the strike of the torpedo, they would miss, even by seconds, which would, again, shooting at a boat and missing it by 2 or 3 times, you were like, oh, no way. I can't, next target of opportunity, right? If it was going too fast, going too slow, you just couldn't calculate it. But that's interesting.
If they miss, they just go on.
Calculating forward trajectory. So that's interesting how that plays. So, we have all of these people that did some pretty cool stuff. Now, listen to this. In World War II, they stopped the Dazzle pattern. Think about why.
Why would they have stopped it? I have no idea.
It's okay. We have a package, and we have
just keep rolling.
Just keep rolling. The package is here, but I could have.
Who needs editing?
Yeah, we could have went into a fun comedy about that. But so you know why they stopped it? They stopped it because the advent of the increased capabilities of radar and sonar. They didn't need it anymore.
I would also say heat-guided. Don't they have missiles that are now heat-guided too as well eventually?
The ammunition, everything was recalculated because now they were getting into
higher technology.
So technology. And also, they didn't want to make it that obvious out there because in World War II, they were facing Japanese kamikazes. So they would just dive right on.
There were some badass people too, just like those Spartans.
Yeah, they were committed.
The Vikings.
They were committed. They were committed to what they did. But it's interesting to see how history plays into what we do.
It's amazing. We do it. We're a day in and day out, but I learn something new every day.
And we do. And we're always asking the reason why, right? Why does this happen? How can we build a better camouflage? Okay, we're not going to hide the officer. We're not.
It's impossible.
Totally impossible. When they're approaching a vehicle or they're approaching something.
You're there, and they know you're there.
And they know you're there. But what we do is build a system that makes them think even for an extra second or two. Because if you have to ask yourself that question, what is that?
What is that?
And that asking the question, the officer can move over the course of 6 or 8 feet by someone even asking the question, hey, what is that? By that time, they're already on top of you. So that is what we really pride ourselves on, is taking this ancient technology from shields and from technology that existed and why it was used, and applying it to law enforcement. Because here's the deal. You don't have a lot of advanced equipment getting out of your patrol vehicle. They don't have that. It's like us moving across open terrain, right? We don't have a lot of this high-speed stuff. It just comes down to man versus man.
Or woman.
Or woman, right? Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Give me the dagger eyes.
I'm right here.
The dude's right here.
The dude is here.
The dude's here. But no, exactly. When it becomes down to warrior versus war, or peacemaker versus subject, or however we want to put it. But the whole thing is that the technology exists, and we have it. We just don't see it. Right?
And we want to bring more of this technology to the forefront. If you have something that's working and have an idea, we would love to have it on air.
Oh, and also you're going to have this idea. Hey, did you think about this? I'm going to tell you right now.
And some of these are funny because 9 times out of 10, did you think about this?
I would
You've
say
already got it
99
scribbled down on a notepad somewhere.
Correct. 99.9% of the time, and I'm not being arrogant about it, but we've probably came across these ideas, and we're either implemented them, and we're not going to tell you about them because we're not going to tell you the vector is a platform system where we attach and detach different things. We're not going to tell you because it gives the officer that tactical advantage. It's kind of like telling the U-boat commander, "Hey, we're going to have you." Imagine if it was
We're
back
going to
in,
paint our ships, and you're not going to know what we're doing.
Yeah,
well,
imagine.
then
Yeah,
you know what we're doing.
1909, we had YouTube, and we're like, "Hey, you know what we're doing? We're out there painting ships today. Hey, you know why? We're going to cause some because some idiot's going to go on there and start telling all the secrets to the wrong people."
Correct.
And you don't want to do that.
OPSEC.
You know what? We don't use Instagram, but we're going to start using it.
We do have Instagram.
Well, I don't use it.
We do.
I don't. But
We're better at our tactics than our social media, apparently.
yeah, I'm not gonna. I don't. But we're gonna start doing a lot more tactics for. And we're working on this. So if you can show us the credentials, who you are and what you do. We'll start showing some more shield tactics and techniques being
Correct.
used.
We do vet. We will show you, but you have to vet that you're an officer.
Yeah, we do that all the time. And if you want to talk to some of the officers who we have to do that, and the reason we do that is for officer safety, right? Why do we do it, Wendy?
Officer safety.
Yeah, because why?
Our goal is to protect officers.
Yeah, but people are going to call us up and they're going to try to get the tactics or the tools.
We have people call all the time wanting shields who are not law enforcement.
And we try to vet them out.
We don't try. We do vet them.
But I'm saying we try. Once we do that, then all of a sudden it's crickets. Hold on, let me hit my cricket. I love putting my cricket thing.
Cricket button, isn't it?
Then we
right?
hear. I love that. My cricket.
Show me
button.
your credentials, then we get crickets.
So we do this. We kind of do that all the time. But we'd like to talk about, and today what we wanted to do for law enforcement, correct, was to address that subject of the shield covers.
The why is very important. You're entrusting us with equipment that needs to protect your life, and you need to understand the why. And it helps. It helps with that open-mindedness we were discussing. If we can explain to an officer why this works and where it's worked with their actual brothers and sisters that they can speak to, it holds a lot more credentials or a lot more weight.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. The reason why, and actually do it, right? Go out and actually do it. So if we hit you with the baseball bat, we do all the stuff, but people ask us why we do that, because we want to give you the confidence in the equipment, but also there's a lot of thinking process. Like we're on the phone with doctors and some very learned people all the time asking questions on, tell us more about this, tell us about that. And everything that we do has to kind of work together as a system, correct?
Yes.
And that's what we do, right? Your eyes, your ears, the cranial nerves, right? Let's say the first 5: imprint, memory, olfactory, optic, ocular, motor, trochlear, all that. If you can see it, smell it, feel it, touch it, you can imprint a memory. So that comes in from my SF background, right? Being an SF medic, so I understand both medic and tactics. And I'm on the team. Thank God that I did that type of job, because it gave me kind of a greater outlook. But also, what it also did was I would go in there on my teams, and if I had needed a piece of equipment and I didn't have it, we either ordered it from outside or I built it. Like one of my first aid bags, I built my first aid bag. I went downtown Fayetteville and had one of the seamstresses, according to my design, sew together my bag. And I'm really proud of that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I was a young kid. I was in my early 20s, and I was on a team, and I wanted to get to my equipment quicker and faster. So I understood that time is really important, right? And that kind of plays into what we're doing now. Everything is time, seconds. We don't deal with seconds. We deal with
milliseconds in some
right?
things. And that's a great testament to what we do as far as training goes. We have a very eclectic conglomeration of people involved in this. The tactics themselves are drawn from officers in the field that have had real life experiences and real life police reports, but that's only a part of the equation. The other part is Bobby's SF background.
Or my brothers. Or
the brothers
right?
in the military and the doctors that we have too.
Yeah.
So it's a whole team of people that work together with these tactics in our training.
Listen, I am not by no stretch of the imagination a tactical genius, but I do have access to an incredible library.
And even my short arms had to do with the shield straps.
Yeah.
Because people are ergonomically different.
Right. And you know what? We can reach out to some really amazing people in all walks of life in a small community, whether they be military, whether they be law enforcement or rescue, right? Or firefighters or EMS. We all have kind of the same problem, right? And all it is, this whole job is designed about one thing: saving human life. Every job, every first responder, military, it's all about saving human life. And it's a mindset. So if we can focus more on that mindset, how do we build products that will save human life?
Thinking outside the box.
Got to think outside the box.
And you could try a million things, and maybe they don't work, but maybe it's that 1,000,001 thing that does work.
Yeah, and it's like my Gen 1 never should see the light of day.
Gen 1 through 5 should probably never see the light of day.
It's like it could be a something. It's just totally not there.
But it's a start, and it's an idea, and it's something that you can build upon that makes something better that can actually save a life.
Well, that's exactly how the Dazzle pattern worked, because they found out the U-boats, right? It was a start. They were now facing a predatory enemy under the water, so now they had to, let's cause predatory confusion, paint our boats, camouflage speed, color, right? And it worked for a short period, and then it didn't.
And on that note, too, now we can make the shields float because of a spark, because of an idea.
Correct.
It didn't quite work the first time the way it was supposed to, so Bobby then went back to the drawing board and found that is the displacement.
Yes.
We can actually make the shield float using a cover that displaces
ancient technology on how to make steel float.
Again, ancient technology that works.
Literally.
We can cover that in another episode.
Yeah, so again, we don't have to compromise safety of the officers. So again, to put a lesser protection like a polyethylene or something that will not stop green tips, right?
Well, and
or
what
steel
work
core penetrators.
And on heated circumstances,
Right.
the polyethylene does
changes
degrade.
It changes its chemical composite under extreme heat. So now we don't want to compromise shield safety, so we had to go to the drawing board and make it float. So how do we do that? Well, we went back to ancient stuff and we looked at it and said, hey, this works. And we threw it in a tub and
Physics.
And bang, it floated. And then now we can throw it in an ocean and it will float. Now, how do we make steel float? Well, we can't tell you that. But what we can tell you that
proprietary.
It's proprietary, but it will work. And the reason we work is because we do study the pillars of ancient society, and we come up with some really, really great stuff. But we're always asking that reason why, right?
Yep, the reason why.
And that was what today's subject or
podcast, whatever you want to call it. We're so thankful. All the law enforcement tuning in. If you're not law enforcement, you support law enforcement, you're just as important. We thank everyone, first responders, all out there.
Yeah, and the reason we say support law enforcement, it's about supporting the people that are preserving our way of life. I firmly believe that. If you're out there and you want to do harm to people who are trying to go out there, listen, these are complete strangers that come to your house and to protect you in the worst situations. And they've got a mindset and a commitment to do that. And we take our hat off to that. Our background is all walks of life, but it all comes down to what? Saving human life. And you know what? You know what's interesting? Talking about saving human life, and we're asked this question all the time when an officer gets out of a car. We know you're not going to go to the trunk, but if you can deploy our shield and you're going to run into a situation facing gunfire, we know that you can reach over, grab our vector, and put your car in park jump out of the car and I know you're going to run towards gunfire. But I know that we're building the best product in the world, that if you have to face something very dangerous, projectiles or something, we trust what we build 100%. We wouldn't be on here talking about it. I wouldn't be here kind of telling you my secrets on where the Dazzle pattern comes on, right? Because that's kind of a secret to a certain degree. And another degree, but that's the worst
But
thing.
you're not going to overwrite it. If somebody sees that, they're going to be like, what?
Yeah, if you want to build Dazzle patterns to protect our officers, please feel free doing that. You know, our shield, you're not going to build our shield design. You're going to build, you know, what type of pattern you want to build. But what happens is, you know...
And on that note, it's whatever protects an officer. We're not that type of company. We'd rather have an officer have something up to protect them than not.
Yes.
Whether it's our shield, another shield, a helmet, whatever you're using, we want you to use it and be protected.
Because, again, it's about protecting human life.
100%.
So the wrap up today would be on the Dazzle pattern, Dazzle camouflage. It was not meant to conceal. It was meant to confuse.
I'm confused a lot.
The vector is not meant to conceal. It's meant, again, not meant to conceal the entire body. It's not meant to protect the entire body. Not meant to do that.
Nope.
Meant to protect the center line of the body. If like the German U-boats, right, firing
If they took a direct hit, it was a bad day.
correct. But you know,
We can keep you from getting that direct hit.
I
we
can
keep
keep
you
the
alive
engine-
and in the fight.
keep the engine's room protected.
Yep.
Don't hit the engine room.
Yep.
If I can keep that engine room, the small portion of that boat, which is our body, right, protected, the bullets are not going to go into the engine room. I can keep that ship floating and in the game.
Because you can cut off the compartments with a tourniquet.
Correct. That's a good analogy.
Yep.
Great analogy.
See, I'm just not another pretty face.
Yeah. Say, hold on. What did you just say?
Easy now there. What are you doing? I've got your crickets.
Hold on. Not another pretty face. Hold on. I'm only playing with that.
Hardy ho.
No, but so again, see how it all plays in together? So we have to think differently, right? Right,
Yep.
Wendy? We have to think differently, kind of think like a U-boat commander, or, think like a merchant marine. How would we, don't think about how you would do it. Think about how they would do it. How would they get to you? How would they put you out of commission? How would they hurt you? And if you can answer the reason why or how they would do it, then you're ahead of the game.
And you can build technology and training and equipment to counteract that.
Yeah, we call it reverse planning. So, we do that as part of our briefbacks and stuff like that, but it's really important that we kind of get everybody thinking the same way. So we had a great show today, Wendy.
Awesome.
And we're going to have other shows. We put out a lot of podcasts, and, we don't know when we're going to put them up. We just say, let's do one right now. We have someone that's here. Let's do a podcast. Some people say, hey, let's do it every week. I'm like, nope, we're doing it. We got someone, great. We're going to sit you down, put you on the mic, and talk to you. Because, you can't, we're not scripted. We're not edited, as you can tell by the doorbell ringing.
And the chair dropping.
and the chair trafficking. Okay, so that was the show. And we thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
And stay protected.